I'm Faisal Saleh, the founder and executive director of the Palestine Museum US. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome you all to our event. It's the US virtual book launch of the book Oranges from Jaffa. And we're very delighted today to have the author of that book with us, Nadine Sayegh. Welcome, Nadine. For the audience, thank you for joining us. Please enter any questions you like to pose for Nadine in the Q&A tab, and feel free to enter comments in the chat function. Both of these are in the bottom of the screen. And if you're having any problems with, if there's any problem with the audio or the video, you could let us know in the chat as well. Great. Welcome, Nadine. Could you, for starters, tell us a little bit about yourself and your family and where you're from, etc.?
Good afternoon and good evening. Thank you very much for having me here and inviting me, Faisal. I'm really delighted. My name is Nadine Sayegh. I was born in Lebanon from a Palestinian father and a Lebanese mother. And I was very lucky to actually grow up in Austria, in Vienna. So I've been living in Austria for most of my life, but from an Arabic family. And of course, we're very attached to our Palestinian roots. And myself and my brothers, we speak Arabic at home. And my children, I'm married to an Austrian, but our children speak Arabic as well. And it is very important for me to remember my roots and to talk about how it was when Palestine was still Palestine. And I felt a few years ago, I really felt the urge to write down the family history based on the stories that my father would tell us, just to make sure that we can keep them for the next generations, the generations to come.
So Nadine, was the idea of the book, was it your idea to write a book, or were you responding to suggestions from friends and relatives and things like that?
In fact, to be very frank with you, it grew out of a feeling, a bit of frustration. You see, for me as a Palestinian growing up in Austria, in Vienna, it is a very interesting situation. If you go back in history, you will remember that Austria actually, there's an incident that started the First World War in Austria, and Austria had a very unfortunate role in the Second World War as well, Hitler being an Austrian actually. So Austria is a city that is very much turned towards its past and living in its past. Vienna, by the way, is a magnificent place. Yes, it's a magnificent city, but very heavily burdened through its past. So as a young girl growing up in Vienna, I really felt that it was anathema for me to say that I'm Palestinian. Really, there was no space. People didn't want to hear about it. Yes, what had happened during the Second World War was still so heavy that nobody wanted to hear about it. So for a while, I hid behind the fact that technically I was born in Beirut, I'm Lebanese, but really I never felt Lebanese. And so I tried to hide my Palestinian heritage for quite a while. And it took me a few decades to come to terms with that and to feel comfortable about being Palestinian. And this is something that a feeling that I certainly did not want my children to have. I wanted them to be proud of their origins. And so one day I decided that all the stories that my father was telling my brothers and I when we were kids growing up in Vienna in the 1980s, our bedtime stories, I decided to just collect them and put them together in a book. And incidentally, so this is the book that I wrote, where I describe the life of a nice, well-to-do Palestinian family when Palestine was still Palestine, and how they were living, and to show that really they were living like so many other families. up until 1948 when they had to flee, and to give them a face, to show the Palestinian social fabric. How did these people live on a day-to-day basis? What were the social interactions? What's so special about them, if something is special about them? And when the book came out last year in fall, it came out in German first. It actually made it to the bestsellers list in Vienna, which I'm very proud of. I was told by so many friends and acquaintances and people who bought the book that they really had no idea what it is to be a Palestinian, and they had no idea that Palestine was not a land without people for a people without land. They were not aware, at least speaking from the people that I know in Austria, they were not aware that they were really Palestinians living in Palestine and what their life was before.
So Nadine, how do you think the book is going to change people's ideas and to change the narrative about Palestine in Austria and of course in other parts of the Western world? Can you share with us your thinking about what your intention was behind the book and how that's going to happen?
Well, I don't have the hubris to really think that it will create a great ripple, to be frank with you. But the feedback I received from the people who read it is that, in fact, it educated them on a chapter of history that is something that is not taught in schools, at least not in Austria. And incidentally, I've been to a French school in Austria. I know that we did not study the topic at all. We studied the Second World War at length. But this part, the Nakba and what happened to the Palestinians after 1948 was never something that was taught in schools. And so my Austrian friends and acquaintances and people who wrote to me and contacted the publishing house, they said that it educated them and it helped them understand the present situation, because they think it's a religious conflict. Yes, sometimes in media, people think it's a religious conflict when really it has nothing to do with religion at all. So they were grateful to find out and to make them understand the news. So now they said when they read the news, when they listen to the news, first of all, it's very disheartening, unfortunately, but at least they understand. And some of them said that it makes them sad and angry. Yes, I was a bit surprised, this coming from Austrians.
Yeah. Before we go on to some more about the book, has Austria changed in the last few years or anything, or, you know, their perception of Palestine? Or I know you said originally that, you know, that there was no interest and they didn't really want to deal with it and they ignored it completely. Has there been any change during the last few years at all?
To be frank with you, in my view, it has become even more extreme. Yes, our Austrian chancellor has actually raised the Israeli flag on the chancellery in May 2021 to show support for Israel. Yes, when the conflict flared up again, to the shock actually of many people in Austria. I think even the president of the republic protested at the time. Yes. He did not understand why the chancellor did this. By the way, the chancellor has been deposed and is long gone. Yeah. But not because of that, because of course of other matters. But it is very difficult in Austria to talk about that conflict and not to be branded an anti-Semite. So there is a big confusion between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. And seeing that anti-Semitism still has not been completely stamped out in Austria, it's a very heavy accusation that actually can be raised quite easily, since there is a confusion between you can be against the state of Israel and not be an anti-Semite. So there is a bit of confusion here, but in Austria, it's easy to be branded an anti-Semite.
Yeah. Are there any Palestinian groups in Austria that put on activities or participate in any cultural events about Palestine or anything like that?
Frankly, very little.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very little. As I told you, in Austria, it is, I mean, Austria is a small country in the first place. Vienna is a small city. There's not many Palestinians in the first place. And really, there is no space for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Now, in the book, you wanted to portray the history and the culture of Palestine before 1948 as it existed then, and to kind of debunk the myth that Palestine was a land without people or a people without a land. So how do you do that in the book? Would you want to tell us or read something from the book, perhaps that talks to that?
Yes, if I may, I'm going to start with chapter 1 to read 2 pages to you, just to give you a flavor and to give the readers a flavor.
Great, thank you.
I got my first bodyguard when I was 11. His name was Jamil, and he was 16. Jamil was half Mapuche from Chile. With his slingshot, he could hit a wasp in flight. He was one of a kind. My father hired him after a kid at school had attacked me with a pocket knife. For Jaffa in 1947, it was a scandal. No one carried a knife around in their pocket, much less pupils in a private school. At the time, Jaffa was one of the safest and probably also one of the most beautiful places in the world. The city had existed since ancient times. Jaffa, jewel of the Mediterranean, right next to the newly built city of Tel Aviv. Jaffa, blue sky and summer breezes, spiced with the salty tang of freedom, and always, always this scent of orange blossom. Jaffa, center of the citrus trade and refined good living. The men wore suits and ties with red feathers on their heads. The women wore long dresses and smiles on their faces. They rode through the streets in horse-drawn carriages or took the bus. Like all boys of our age, we children got up to all kinds of mischief. We played soccer, we rode donkeys as if we were cowboys. We accidentally broke windows while kicking a ball around. Once, we broke a policewoman's window. What bad luck. We liked to play hide and seek, best when it was already dark. We drove our mothers to despair and made our fathers livid with rage. If they got too angry, we would run off with our tails between our legs, but laughing. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Nicholas Sayer. That's who I am. Our family history goes back to 720. We are Palestinian Christians. My father's name is Bishara Sayer. He owned several orange plantations in Jaffa, along with apartment buildings and a factory. Lots of land, lots of fruit, lots of life. My mother is Rose Zarife. She also owned a number of orange groves and apartment buildings. They met at the dentist. She, a tender 21-year-old, he, already 40. They knew each other by sight. He was wearing a black tie in mourning for his mother. They exchanged meaningful glances in the waiting room. Both of them were holding their cheeks because of the toothache. They managed to exchange a few words as they were waiting to be treated. The dialogue followed a certain ritual, the words traditionally spoken to express condolences. I wish you a long life. My condolences, Monsieur Bishara. Thank you, Mademoiselle Rose. May you live long. Such is life. It is important to have faith. It gives us comfort and a meaning to life. Do your grace and beauty come from God or your dear mother? Ah, now you're just trying to flatter me. You have such a pleasant voice. Do you sing? Not really. But thank you for the compliment, Bshara. Do you live in this nice neighborhood? Yes, not far from here. Do you come here often? Not if I can help it. Ah, the doctor is calling. It's my turn. Maybe we can carry on talking afterwards. I'll be here. So you could say that I started life thanks indirectly to a painful molar, as did my sister Frida and my younger brothers Tony and George. We all have dental origins. In our neighborhood, I was famous for getting into trouble, a rascal of the first order. We lived on top of Jabal Arqatinji hill, which had been settled mostly by Christians in the district of Ajami. In Arabic, this means Persian, a discreet reminder that Persians had also once pitched their tents there. The hill we lived on was like a miniature Tower of Babel, and the name was reminiscent of the Ottomans. Jabal Arqatinji, the mountain on which arak is made. It's perhaps a bit of an exaggeration to call it a mountain, but it was nonetheless a steep hill. The main road meandered like a tired boa up to the summit, if you can call it that. There were lots of small streets, lanes, and alleys branching off from both sides of this main street, the end of which offered a panoramic vista as far as the horizon. And that's where our house was, the Sayer Villa. It's still here today, not far from the stone steps going down that take you back to Ajami, if you're sure-footed enough. The streets of Jabal Arqatinji were lined with magnificent Mediterranean-style villas set in luxuriant, humid vegetation with verdant gardens and people quietly cultivating their bougainvilleas and jasmines, with the occasional yellow and white butterfly fluttering past. Red poppies grew wild at the sides of the road. The families at the top of the hill had old Christian names with long historical roots. Saliba means cross, Khuri means priest, Zarife means beautiful, Farah means joy, Beiruti means from Beirut, and Sayer, that's us, means goldsmith. Today you would call it a respectable neighborhood. There was never any need to lock the front door. The family name was better than any lock, and mutual trust better than an insurance policy.
Beautiful, thank you. There's Zahi Khouri in the audience is wondering whether you are the daughter of Nicholas Sayer, who worked for UNRWA.
Hello, Zahi. Yes, I am. And Dad is sitting next to me. He was going to join at the end of the presentation.
Okay, so Zahi says again here, Nadine, from your reading, I gather you're the daughter of Nicholas, for us, Nino. You lived literally meters from us. Frida and Nino are my age. I knew late Rosa and Bshara.
I moved, Zahi. I actually was in Jerusalem 10 days back to present the book at the Willy Brandt Center. And I went and visited our houses. I visited our house and I also saw your house.
Those are the houses in Nadine, the houses in Jaffa?
The houses in Jaffa, they're adjacent. One is next to the other. I saw both.
How was your visit to the houses? How was that? How do you feel?
Well, our house is very run down, to be frank with you. It probably needs a bit of renovation. Zahi's house is very new. No. It looks like somebody has renovated it. And there is a very, very big Israeli flag hanging from one of the windows.
Yeah, I remember seeing a video on social media of an elderly Palestinian woman that was in Jaffa. I was visiting the house that belonged to her, and she noticed it was run down. So she asked the owner if she can go inside. They won't let her go inside. They denied her request. But then she asked him if they would let her bring some paint and paint the windows. She wanted to paint the windows of her house because she thought it looked terrible. And then they won't let her do that either. So such a shame, you know.
I was luckier in the sense that currently there's a very nice Palestinian family who lives in the house. And when I went to the house 5 years ago, actually, together with my father, Nino, and my son, to gather information and just to have an idea of how it was like, so as to have information to be able to write the book. The owner let us into the house. He was very kind. And this time again, I went back and I gave him a copy of the book, because our actual visit 5 years back, together with my father and my son, is mentioned at the very end of the book, because it was quite memorable. And I was very happy to be able to give the owner a copy of the book, and I think he was very happy and moved.
So how did a Palestinian family come to live in that house? Did they buy it, or who did they buy it from, or what? Do you know what the background of that is?
My understanding is that it is absentee property.
Mm-hmm.
My understanding is that it fell to the Israeli state, and that they somehow sell these houses, but they don't sell the deeds. So, but I'm not entirely sure, because it was a touchy topic. So you may build a house, or you may have this house, but it will never really belong to you, I think, specifically if you're a Palestinian. But I'm not very sure. What I know is that it is absentee property, and we have no claim to it whatsoever.
My understanding is that in Israel, they don't sell the government doesn't sell the property outright. They provide like a 100-year lease or something like that.
Yes.
And after 100 years, it goes back to the state for some reason.
And by contrast, as I said, I live in Vienna, in Austria, where, you know, before the Second World War, many Jews had actually to flee the country to save their lives, and many of them actually also sold their property. And my understanding is that it was all restituted. Those who wanted to have their property back and could prove ownership, it was all restituted. And up until now, when a Jewish family can prove that they had to sell something specifically also under the current value, because they were fleeing a country at war that was life-threatening to them, everything is restituted and given back. So I can see that there is atonement on the one hand side, and even serious efforts to restitute what was unrightfully taken. And I see that by contrast, there's not even an acknowledgement of what happened in 1948 back then.
Yeah, definitely. Zahi has left his email address for you in the chat, and we'll send that to you if you forget to copy it. Anyway, going back to the book, the book describes the story of a carefree childhood that comes to an abrupt end. Would you like to read any passages about that carefree childhood? Is that something you would want to read, or you'd rather read something else? Up to you.
What I'd like to read is how Palestinian society functioned. Again, I would like to show the institutions and the social fabric. And so I would like to read about an instance where my father, actually, as I mentioned at the beginning, was really a rascal, and he was constantly getting into trouble. Hence, my grandfather at some point in time really got him a bodyguard, a young man to watch Jamil. And the straw that broke the camel's back is that my dad was actually stabbed in school. Somebody with a small pocket knife came and really stabbed him in the shoulder. At which point my grandfather said, okay, now that's too much. We need to do something. And they actually went over this incident to juvenile court. Yes. So I'd like to read out this passage to you. We left the Sire villa and set off on foot for the court. My father was visibly seething. His steps were uncommonly heavy, as his elegant shoes from London resounded loudly against the asphalt. Now they're playing with knives at school, he muttered into his beard. That's how far we have come. It's a tragedy. That's what it is. He was talking more to himself. Throughout his life, my father was always circumspect, reserved, and restrained when others were loud or rude. He was completely devoted to his family, loved his wife Rose, loved us 4 children. I was naturally sorry for the trouble I'd caused him, but I didn't feel I was to blame. I wasn't the one who had drawn the knife. For my father, though, it was a question of reputation. People were so quick to talk about you. Bshara Sayer, major landowner and businessman, had to accompany his son to juvenile court. Did you hear all about it? Do you already know about it? Yes, there was a knife fight or something like this. Really? Young Nicholas? Who would have thought? Poor family. Oh well, bad luck can strike anyone. What can you do? My father kept a lookout for acquaintances and sideways glances, as if he wanted to slip into a house of ill repute without being seen. But the courthouse was worse than a brothel. Bonjour, Yapshara! A friendly voice greeted us from behind, as we were going up the courthouse steps. And marhaba, ya Nicola! Look how you've grown. Soon you'll be as tall as your father. It was Aleko Zarife, my mother's young cousin. Just what my father needed now, someone to witness our humiliation. Aleko was always friendly and was strikingly good-looking, like Gary Cooper, a young man who always liked to play and joke with us younger ones. We looked up to him. What a wonderful coincidence, said my father. He forced a smile. What are you doing here, Aleko? Ah, it's these fishermen, you know, dynamite. This morning, we caught a couple of them throwing sticks of dynamite into the sea. Boom! How can anyone fish like that? You have to feel sorry for them. Just imagine. One of them lit the fuse but waited too long. It cost him 2 fingers. What's that about? I asked him. Dynamite fishing is a very dirty business, Nicholas. The people who do it are very poor and desperate. They don't have anything else. But if someone has to stoop so low, he should at least figure out how to do it properly. People don't really have a feel for the right moment to toss the stick. And before you know it, you've lost a few fingers. He held up his hand as if he'd lost 3 fingers. I've seen it so often. 1-0 for the fish, we call these accidents. He was always joking. He worked for the British Mandate in the administration, more precisely, the fisheries department. For a young man, fresh out of university, a job as a Ka-Imam or civil servant was a dream come true. A job in the administration meant that you had career prospects, could earn a living and marry well. Life was on the right track. Aleko got the job through my mother, Rose. She invited her uncle from the city government to dinner, took him aside, and whispered a few words into his ear. The man nodded with his eyes closed and smiled to himself. Some life trajectories are set in place with just a small request. The fisheries department, where Aleko had his office, was under the British Mandate for Palestine, founded in the early 20th century and approved after World War I by the League of Nations. It was meant to ensure welfare and development. Britain obtained the mandate in 1922, and that's why all the top positions in the city administration were occupied exclusively by the British. Their deputies were Palestinians, including various relatives of my mother, 3 powerful uncles. They did the work and pulled the strings, while the British sipped their tea and sat around feeling superior and puffing their cigars in smoke-filled rooms. Aleko raised his hand and rushed up the stairs of the courthouse to a courtroom where a dynamite fisherman was about to be tried. My father and I watched his slim figure disappear behind the door. Father, I said sheepishly, Aleko completely forgot to ask us why we're here. No, he did not. He has good manners and zo, the Arab sense of tact.
Thank you. Excellent. There are a few questions about the book from the audience. People are wondering whether has anybody contacted you or interested in making a film about the stories in the book.
I'm very delighted, but so far no. But to be frank with you, it would be nice. I think it would be nice.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many Palestinian filmmakers out there, and I'm sure one of them might be interested. Just a matter of talking to some. And some people were asking about the getting the book, and somebody said that it's not available on Amazon, and this is the English version of the book. And I wrote some responses that the museum will have a supply of books in a matter of a few days, and the people will be able to order them online in the US for delivery in the US very, very soon. And thank you, Nadine, for making these books available to the museum.
My pleasure.
One question was, did you have any problems publishing the book in Austria? Did the Israeli lobby try to prevent you from doing that, or put any obstacles in your way? Or
it's a very relevant question. Actually, no. But what happened is that when my editor tried to advertise it, and this Edition A, the publishing house of the book, is actually a best-selling publishing house. They only take authors where they think that it's going to be a big hit. Yes. So I was very moved when actually he approached me, and I said, yes, okay, let's do that together. And but I did warn him. I said to him, look, you have to remember where we are. We are in Austria, in Vienna. So just be aware that when we publish this book, there might be, repercussions. And for some reason, this gentleman was completely oblivious to that until he tried to reach out to the newspapers and to radio stations and TV stations, the way he usually conducts his marketing routines. And he said to me that the silence was deafening. He said that he had never heard that, he had never had that before. And he was so surprised. And I said to him, but I told you, you should not be surprised. There was actually one big newspaper, I have to say, that did an interview with me, and I think it helped a lot. And I've had a few very successful public readings that went very well. I'm very glad. But the feedback to the article was interesting. So this is Courier, which is one of the biggest newspapers, that ran a big article on the book, explaining who I am and the book, etc., etc. And then immediately after that, they were contacted by an institute called Mina Watch, where the person complained to the editors, saying that I did not mention that in 1948 Jews were also expelled from Iraq, and why I do not mention things like these. And so the newspaper calls me and asked me to respond to that. And I said, look, I also do not talk about the separation from India, from the British Empire, and I don't mention the Great Leap in China in 1948. I mean, this has nothing to do with us. I'm recounting the story of my family in 1948. What happened to other people in other countries really is not my topic. So please do inform this gentleman that I have nothing to do with that, and it is not my topic. But he insisted. He insisted that he wants to have a full-page editorial in the newspaper to criticize the book. Yes, but this did not happen.
Yeah, interesting. Anyone else has any other comments or questions, please put them forward. There was a comment here from Rima Bordkosh, who said that she is from Jaffa and went and visited there 3 times. So it'd be interesting to find out from Rima what her experience has been. Perhaps we can talk about that later in the program today. Any other thoughts that you have, Nadine, about the book and the subject that you want to share? Any more readings, or would you are you at the point, would you like me to show some of the photographs that you sent me?
I would like to read one more part from the book, because you see, when I was, as I'm saying, when I was growing up and I said that I'm an Arab, usually Austrians say, aha, so you're from Arabia. I say, no, I'm Palestinian. I said, aha, okay, well, anyway, it never went well. Yes, it never went down well when I said I'm Palestinian. I always wished I could say I'm from the Netherlands. Yes, then you have associations with cheese and tulips and Van Gogh, things like these.
Wooden shoes.
But that has been my experience. When I say that I'm Palestinian, they look at me and they go, what? How could you be Palestinian? Well, I am. Yes, I am. So there is a big, how shall I say? I can only speak about Austria, Germany, Europe, but I feel that there is a lack of education. Yes, they think that Arabia is one big giant country and everybody is the same. They would expect me to be veiled, I think, and because I'm Palestinian, to have, I don't know, a bomb around my waist or something like this. Yeah? So people are always genuinely surprised. So I took the opportunity in the book to try and educate people a little bit about the Arab world and to make them understand a little bit. And the feedback from acquaintances and people who have read the book was that, oh, we never knew, yes, that there is such a versatility in the Arab world. We think that there is Arabia, yes, and usually it is a conflict-laden place and negative associations in the news. So I wanted to educate people a little bit. And so if you allow me, I will read my third and last excerpt. The Arab world, my father said, was a mosaic of different peoples linked by a common language. In the east were the Arabs from Mesopotamia, later to become Iraq. They were the successors of King Hammurabi, who wrote the Code of Hammurabi, a Babylonian collection of legal decisions from the 18th century before Christ, and also the first public code of law. Its cultural center was the once so magnificent city of Baghdad, the center of the beautiful tales of the Orient collected in the famous 1001 Night. Towards the south, in the direction of the Arabian Peninsula, lived the old traditional desert people who crossed the sands on camelback, moving on from one day to the next. For centuries, these people who eventually settled after all, cultivated their date palms. The fishermen in the south dived for pearls. They made their living holding their breath. They searched for the dana, the huge pearl that would bring them wealth. They risked their lives for it. Many died in the attempt to dive even deeper and bring more and more pearls to the surface. Some of them burst their lungs, others drowned. In the end, the dana was not at the bottom of the Arabian Sea, but buried under the desert sands in the form of black gold, the petrol. Then there were the Arab lands in North Africa with their own deserts and characteristics. Egypt with its pharaonic history and the people who still looked as if they had emerged from the wall paintings in the tombs. The Coptic Christians living in this region still regard themselves as the descendants of the pharaohs and give their children names such as Isis or Ramses. Then there is Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco. Interestingly, the Vandals, a Germanic tribe from the far north, traversed all of Europe during the migration period, crossed the Mediterranean Sea, and blended completely with the people in Tunisia and the surrounding area. That's why there are so many blue and green eyes in this region. Our language also reflects this pluralism. A Saudi has a completely different accent to a Lebanese, to the point where the two have difficulty understanding one another. Classical Arabic, this wonderful written language of the Quran, the language we learn at school, is hardly spoken on the street. Every country, every region adds its own local color, words with different pronunciations, sentences expressed differently, syllables vocalized in another way. Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria make up a separate region with the descendants of the Phoenicians in Lebanon, the trading nation that invented the number 0 in order to calculate faster. Syria and Palestine were the scene of the Crusades and home of the ancient Arab people. There were also large Christian minorities in these three countries, like us and all our neighbors.
Thank you. Wonderful. Some questions about the book and the language. So is the original book written in German and then translated to English?
Yes.
Did you do the translation yourself? Somebody asked, or someone else did it?
I'm very picky. I did actually, it took 3 translations for me to accept the last one. So the first one was unacceptable. I said no. The second one was also unacceptable. I said no. The third one, actually written, was a good one. And nonetheless, I think I worked on it for 2 months, going through each and every sentence and still improving it. Yes, I wanted it to capture the wit and the poetry, yes, of the German version. I have to tell you, the German is a very, I don't know if you do speak German, but German is a very rich and beautiful language, and you have a word for everything. And so I didn't want to lose the wit and the fun and the poetry from the German version, hence my being picky. And this is why it took 3 translations for me to settle on this one.
Great. Somebody also asked if there was going to be an e version of the book, you know, like on the Kindle or.
I have to inquire with the editor. There is, in fact, of course, in German one, but in English not yet.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. All right. Next, would you like me to show the photographs?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and go through a brief presentation of photos. And here we are. Everybody can see that. Okay, so Nadine, tell me when I need to move to the next photo. So here we go. Do you want to talk through these?
Yes, so this is myself and my dad, Nicholas, who is the main character in the story, and my son, Benedict, standing in front of our house in Jaffa in 2017. This is when the very kind owner allowed us to actually enter and go through the house. And so this photo was made in front of the house 5 years back.
Okay.
What you will see now is a collection of photos that I have from my great-grandparents. These are, you will see my grandparents and great-grandparents. And what I wanted is to share and show that those Palestinians, in many cases, you know, nameless and faceless to many Europeans and Americans, actually looked like many Europeans and Americans, the way they dressed, the way they behaved, the way they talked. I mean, you know, in many countries, usually the middle class and upper middle class, they oriented themselves towards the colonizers, yes? So in the Arab countries, people dressed like the French or dressed like the English, and these were the standards, yes? So you will see that in my family, people were dressed like the Europeans, as well. And so this is my great-grandmother Badia in the early 1900s. This is her husband Salim. The picture is taken by Sabungi in 1901. This is the couple Badia and Salim with my maternal great-great-uncle, Jean. So you see also in the choice of names, of course, yes, so they orient themselves to the Europeans. So the first child is called Jean. And this is Jean and my grandmother, Rose. Yes, and you see, of course, they would look like, I've seen many photos of young Austrian infants at around the same time, and probably you have too. So you see, so this is my grandmother and great-grand-uncle in 1912. And so this is all the children collected together, Jean, Émilie, Alice, and Rose in the early 1920s. And you see they're pretending to be very good and quiet, posing for the photographer, reading a book about music. This is my grandfather, Shara Sayer. This is actually after they had to leave Palestine. The photo was taken in Lebanon. Here he's already in his mid-50s. You see he's quite stern. Unfortunately, he could never really come to terms with what happened to him and to his family and to all other Palestinians who had to leave. And he died shortly after that. This is my father, Nicholas, as an infant. This is my father, Nicholas, as a young man. Yes, the photo is taken from Beirut. Unfortunately, many photos were lost. Yes, of course, when they had to pack up their things in 1948, so many things were lost. So many photos of the actual family we do not have anymore. We have photos from the grandparents' generation and from the children's generation. We have photos from what happened after that. So that's my dad.
Looks like this is a closed line here behind him.
It's on a balcony in Beirut.
Milkat.
Yes. Correct.
Okay, that's the last one.
And the last one, yes. This is my father standing in front of the door of the house. As you can see, it could use another coat of paint. And my father told me that my grandmother Rose kept the key, like so many other Palestinian families. She kept the key to her house, and she would have given everything to be able to go back one day and use the key and open the key again to the house, as they believed that they would be gone only for 2 weeks. Yes, just for the issue to calm down and then to return after 2 weeks. But of course, they never realized that they were going to leave and never come back.
Thank you. There's a question about the name of the book. So explain to us how you arrived at the name of the book and what does the name convey?
It conveys a nostalgia. Yes. Jaffa at the time was the economic center of Palestine because it was a hub. Yes, it was the hub for all those citrus fruits to be planted, grown, collected, put together, put in cases, put on ships and then sent to Europe. And our family is an orchid-owning family. So on both sides, Shara Sayer and Rose Sayer, they came from families who owned orange orchids. So this was what they did. Yes. And nostalgia, because of course everything was lost, and they had all the money invested, of course, in property and in these orchids, and when they had to leave it behind. And but the family life was completely oriented around the oranges. Everything pertained to oranges, the orange harvest and the orange, if they were growing well or not, and the biyarji. And there was the assessor. I explain it also in the book how these there was a job of the assessor. There would be a gentleman who would come, take a look at the orchard and say, that's 50,000 oranges. That's it. We can pay you 50,000. I don't know what was the going price, but we can pay you for 50,000 oranges. They wouldn't count them. They would just assess them. So the orange was their trade. And my father tells me that Jaffa at the time smelt of orange blossoms also.
When, as I mentioned, my family is from a village outside of Jaffa, 5 kilometers from there. And my family had orange groves, bayara, that's what they call them. And after my father passed away, we found a small booklet with the title Hisab al-Bayara. And it's full of handwritten notes and numbers about transactions that he recorded, people that owed him money he owed to the people that did the water, the people that did the plowing of the fields, and that booklet is on exhibit at the museum, along with my father's passport, British passport, and his British ID card, which every Palestinian had to carry during the mandate. So interesting things related to oranges. Anyway, we're getting close to the time. Would you like to introduce somebody to us at this point?
Yes. I have the great pleasure to actually have my father with me. So I'm going to invite him into the picture.
Marhaba.
So I would like to introduce my father, the Nicholas Sayer from the story, who inspired me to write the book on the basis of our bedtime stories.
Yeah. Normally, before they sleep, they ask me to tell them stories, and whatever is written in the book mainly is these little stories which I used to tell them to the children. To not everybody, because we're only two about they are of the same age. Nadine and her brother Bishara. Actually, these two. The other one, I have 3 children, but he was too little, too young, well, to know all these details, which the other 2 knew quite good.
Actually, my brothers are very grateful that I put these stories together, because we all have children and they're all happy that these stories are collected for our children as well.
So what do you think of the book?
The book, I think, well, it is something should have happened long before this about Palestine and certain families, well, how they lived, and not refugees.
You must be very proud of your daughter's work.
Of course. She's a good family woman. She's a good mother. She's well educated. She works hard with her husband. She runs the administration side of a big laboratory in Vienna. Her husband is a doctor, and she helps him a lot. My mother, of course, well, she tried to help the side dealing with the children and home and so on, but she was never able to help my father in his business. Like most women then.
Mm-hmm. You know, you're one of the very few people who lived through the Nakba who are still alive. And what?
On wood.
Yes. طولة العمر لك إن شاء الله. what can you tell us about? What are your thoughts about what happened to Palestine or what happened to Jaffa? When you think about that in your private self, what comes to mind? What comes to your mind?
Loss of a country is very awful, and one feels his heart bleeding all the time. You are never, wherever you go, you are never the same if you have been in your country or town. This is how I feel. I lived in many places, in Lebanon, Jordan, Austria, England, France, but all the time my mind goes back to Jaffa and my friends and the family there.
How did you tell your children about what happened when they were young?
It's a great injustice that before the Palestinian population. Great injustice.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience before we wrap up? We've got a couple of minutes. We have somebody says like father, like daughter. A comment. And are you living? Where are you living now?
I live in Vienna. Actually,
Vienna.
I first I worked for UNRWA and then for UNRWA in Beirut. And you know what, the Lebanese civil war back in the 70s?
Yes.
So the organization relocated here in Vienna. And since 77 or 78, we live here. And the children married Austrian. Nadine married an Austrian, and my two sons, one of them is a doctor, an eye doctor, and the other one is a financial specialist.
Yes. True Palestinians. Zahi Khouri is saying, Shayateen fil Hara. Devils in the neighborhood.
Yeah, we were. Yeah.
Is that what you guys were?
Yes, really, this is true, very true. We were really shayateen, especially I had a bad reputation when I was a kid, a little 10-year-old boy. Well, we did so many things which now I'm ashamed of them.
Nothing so serious. You will read about them in the book. By the way, Zahi is also mentioned in the book also. Yeah. Zahi and Sohail and all the friends.
They were the next door neighbors.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, this has been one of our greatest programs that we presented here. It's such a great honor for us to have both of you with us, and a great pleasure to get to know you. And I look forward to maintaining contact with both of you, and perhaps have you on for other programs in the future. And I've invited Nadine to visit the museum's exhibit at the Venice Biennale. And she said she will consider doing that, since it's a 6-hour drive from Vienna. And Nadine, you must bring your father with you when you come to visit. It's like visiting Palestine.
I will, Papa. You come.
I'll try my best to be in good health.
We do our best to keep you in good health.
Yes. And it is, excuse me, Mr.
Faisal.
Faisal. Tell me a little bit about the
exhibition?
the exhibition you have. Is it an exhibition or a museum or?
Well, we have a museum in the U.S. called Palestine Museum U.S. and I established that 4 years ago. But this year, we have been selected by the Venice Biennale, which is the world's most important art event, to present what they call a collateral event exhibition. One of 30 organizations that were asked to do that. And so we established that exhibit, and it's called From Palestine with Art. And it opened on April 23rd in Venice. And it stays open until November 27th of this year. And it represents 19 Palestinian artists with 30 works of art, including a live olive tree that has Palestinian keys hanging. These are the keys that Nadine talked about that people took with them when they left, thinking they're going to go back in 2 or 3 weeks. So we have 16 of those keys hanging from that live olive tree in the exhibit hall. And it has 2 Palestinian thobes, fully embroidered, fully accessorized with all the accessories, the striped belt, the shawl, the wuka that the women wear on their heads with the coins on it. And we also, on the ground, there's a very large map of Palestine that goes back to 1877. It's about 6 meters long, the map. And people walk on the map and go find their villages on the map and have their picture taken there. So the exhibit has all the Palestinian important symbols, the right of return symbol with the keys, the map, which has the from the river to the sea symbol, as well as the traditional embroidery art, the embroidery art of the Palestinian women. And so, of course, there are a lot of paintings and sculptures to see. And it's just, we have music, Palestinian music playing continuously as part of the exhibit by about 18 Palestinian musicians and singers. So it's a total Palestinian experience once you walk in. And we've seen people cry when they walked in, and they couldn't contain their emotions of seeing all that stuff right in there. So I am sure you will find it
very well. The feeling, this feeling you were talking about, I understand it very, very well.
Yes. We are receiving about 500 visitors a day at the exhibit, which is a phenomenal number, and there'll be, something like close to 100,000 people that might see the exhibit while it's open, which is amazing.
I wish you success and more success.
Thank
and
you.
Really, you are doing something everybody is proud of.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Like we say in Arabic, la shukr ala wajib, but thank you for the compliments. We appreciate that, and we are continuing with our work, and we're working day and night to accomplish the mission, which is to tell the Palestinian story through the arts. That's our main mission.
May I ask? May I share a small story with you?
Sure.
Before we close? As my father mentioned, Benny, can you close the curtain, please? It's very sunny. The day is setting here. It's 7 o'clock in Vienna, and the sun is shining. As my father mentioned, we work in a medical laboratory, and we do some PCR tests, of course, Corona, etc. And one day there is a rabbi. Thank you very much. One day a rabbi actually came to the laboratory and asked me if I could do tests for his congregation. And I said, yes, of course. And we were standing actually outside of the lab because we don't allow anybody to enter the lab if they want to do PCR tests because it is too dangerous. And we're standing in front of the lab and discussing how we were going to do it, because he needs the results to come out before a certain hour, obviously, so as to allow his congregation to pray. And as we're discussing how we can do those very, very fast tests, this was actually in 2020. At some point in time, he asked me, can you guarantee that the test will be ready at this hour? And I said to him, yes, sir, I will do my utmost. They will be ready. And as we were having this conversation in German, of course, it occurred to me that he really does not know who he's talking to. And at some point in time, I asked him, do you have any idea where I could be from? He looks at me and he says, no, I have no idea. And I said to him, my father was born in Jaffa in 1936, and he is not a Jew. He looked at me and he said, and I don't think he meant badly, he said, of this sort, there aren't many anymore left. Yes.
Well, I'm glad you disappointed him.
At the time, I was in the finishing touches of the book.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, Yalla, let's speed this up. Yes, let's speed this up.
Yeah. We just wanted to read one final comment from Zaina Azam, who I'm very familiar with. Zaina, and we had her on our show a number of times. She's a Palestinian poet who lives in the Washington, D.C. area. And Zaina says, so lovely to hear this firsthand account. Thank you for writing this book and for having your father with us today. God bless him. I'm sure the book will be a great success. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zaina. Thank you so much.
And with that, I would like to wrap up the session and thank both of you so much for taking the time to be with us and sharing your life story with us, and also for the books that you provided, Nadine. We're anxious to make them available to people. So thanks to the audience we have, and we look forward to staying in touch, and have a great day. And as we say always at the end, مع السلامة.
الله يسلمك.
الله يسلمك.
وشكرا لاحتوائنا بالمقابلة الجميلة والغنية بكل شيء بوجودك.
احنا زادنا الشرف، شرفنا.
شكرا.
أهلين.
شكرا.
يلا مع السلامة. باي باي.
باي باي.